So you may recall back on the February 11th edition of Under the Radar, I reported some rare good news coming out of the New South Wales education system, that gender theory had been banned in New South Wales classrooms. So here's a much younger me from a couple of months ago. New South Wales public school teachers have been banned from teaching gender theory in the classroom after an independent review into the state's sex and health education resources. Students will no longer be taught that gender is a social construct or that sexuality is non-binary, occurring on a continuum and constantly changing. An edict encouraging teachers to de-gender their language will also be scrapped, along with sexually explicit case studies and teaching aids such as the gender-bred person.
Oh, Jesus.
Which promotes the idea that there are an infinite possibilities of gender identity. The concept of deconstructing gender derives from 1990s queer theory and is understood to be highly contested. Oh, no shit, Sherlock. Even within the social sciences. According to the New South Wales Education Standards Authority's Statement of Equity Principles, curriculum and support materials should reflect evidence-based research. Yes. And so over the weekend we got more good news from the New South Wales Education Department. Safe Schools program to be dumped by New South Wales Government. The controversial Safe Schools program is set to be axed with the New South Wales Government replacing it with a broader anti-bullying program. To be implemented in the third term, the proposed new resource will equip teachers with tools to target all kinds of bullying and discrimination, whilst also empowering vulnerable students from becoming radicalised. Unlike the sexual diversity and gender fluidity focus of the Safe Schools program, the new resource will aim to equip teachers with tools to target all kinds of bullying. A government source said the shift to a broader-based program was being done in recognition that homophobia was not the sole cause of bullying in the playground. The new program is about stopping all kinds of bullying, the source said. It could be bullying because someone's overweight or wears glasses or is transitioning sex, but the overwhelming message is that it is not okay to bully. The program will include lesson plans and material that can be tailored by teachers as required. And that makes a lot more sense. I have no problem with anti-bullying campaigns. The overall strategy should be to say, look kids, everybody's different and we shouldn't bully people because of those differences, rather than singling out particular identity groups for special attention. And someone should probably tell the Victorian State Government Education Minister James Merlino, who insists on running around telling everyone that 75% of same-sex attracted youths had been bullied, even though we know that is based on shoddy research. And we know why special identity groups have been singled out for attention, as former Prime Minister Tony Abbott tweeted out. Good that New South Wales is scrapping so-called Safe Schools, a social engineering program dressed up as anti-bullying. That's right, it's a Trojan horse for social engineering. Here's just one example. The Safe Schools program was widely condemned for the appropriateness of its teaching material, such as the gender fairy story where primary school children as young as 4 were advised that only they could know whether they were a boy or a girl. Remember, this is not backed by solid scientific research. As noted earlier, it's highly contested in the social sciences, and that's putting it mildly. Now, while this may be good news, Miranda Devine notes that the damage has already been done. An epidemic of transgender children is Safe Schools' legacy. Incalculable damage already has been done by teaching children that gender and sexuality is fluid, that heterosexuality is not the norm, and that sex is arbitrarily assigned by a doctor at birth. One consequence has been an epidemic in transgender children presenting to medical clinics since the advent of Safe Schools in June 2014. Referrals for gender services to the Children's Hospital at Westmead have tripled. Melbourne Royal Children's Hospital had 250 children last year presenting with gender dysphoria, distress experienced because you feel you were born the wrong sex. So as I understand it, presenting with gender dysphoria doesn't necessarily mean you have gender dysphoria. Here's a younger me, again, talking about the same phenomenon at a Brisbane hospital. Minority of children with gender issues diagnosed with gender dysphoria, psychiatrist says. Many children and adolescents are identifying as transgender because they are confused about sexuality or think it will make them different. Psychiatrist Stephen Stathis, who runs a gender clinic, said he had seen girls who'd been sexually abused and wanted to identify as transgender. The girls say, if only I'd been a male, I wouldn't have been abused, Dr. Stathis said. Yes, more examples of male privilege. He said the new statewide gender service at Brisbane's Lady Cliento Children's Hospital expected to see about 180 children with gender issues this year, but only a minority would be diagnosed with gender dysphoria. Dr. Stathis said by the time they reach puberty, most of those identify as their birth gender. He said that he'd seen a lot of adolescents trying out being transgender to stand out. One said to me, Dr. Steve, I want to be transgender. It's the new black, he said. The psychiatrist has also seen transgender children so desperate to start puberty blockers, then progress to irreversible hormone treatment, they harm themselves. I've seen genital mutilation, some who try to cut off their penis, he said. The thought of touching their genitals is so abhorrent they don't wash them and get infections. At the end of last year, there was a 2-year waiting list of 100 children wanting to be assessed at the hospital. With state funding, the wait is now down to 3 or 4 months, and the new gender service has seen more than 60 patients since December. So let's have a look at a few more of the repercussions of the Safe Schools program. The New South Wales Education Department reports a spike in transgender students, including a 4-year-old in kindergarten this year who has identified as transgender. Yeah, because being a transtrender is the new black for 4-year-olds. Official statistics are tightly held, but anecdotally, one public school in Sydney's eastern suburbs has 5 transgender children, according to a relative of a student. A regional New South Wales government safe school had 5 transgender students at the start of last year, according to a former teacher. A safe school in outer Sydney had 5 or 6 transgendered children last year in Year 8, all girls, according to a concerned teacher. Safe schools definitely had something to do with all this, he says. We're losing this fight very badly. One teacher has spoken to parents who suddenly received a note from their 14-year-old daughter claiming that she is trans and wants to be called a new name. But after her parents moved her to a non-safe school, she's largely over the confusion now. One of the few doctors willing to criticise the fashion in child surgical abuse is Dr. John Whitehall, Professor of Paediatrics at Western Sydney University, who questions the massive intrusion into the minds and bodies of children. It's a collective madness. Most transgender children will grow out of it through puberty if parents do little more than gently watch and wait. The worst thing that can happen is the child is adopted as a poster child for the school. With teachers being trained by safe schools to think gender is whatever you feel like, it's not surprising we're seeing more kids responding to this propaganda and parents getting on board. It's very hard for professionals to speak out. It's not just political correctness silencing doctors. The prudent, watchful waiting method is now illegal in Victoria. The new Health Complaints Act purports to crack down on dodgy health practitioners, but was driven by a media campaign against so-called gay conversion therapy, which for gender ideologues includes not encouraging a child's sex change. So there you have it. Never underestimate the lengths that gender ideologues will go to push their agenda. Recommending that you take a wait-and-see approach is now considered gay conversion therapy. I'm sorry to do this again, but I played this conversation between Jordan Peterson and Mark Stein on this very topic in Under the Radar just a couple of days ago.
And yet it is becoming ever more state-imposed, because we have situations now in Australia and the United Kingdom where children are taken away from their parents, grade school children, 7, 8, 9, if the parents don't want to go along with the gender reassignment.
Well, there was one gender reassignment clinic for children several years ago, and now the person who started that is now running 43. And in Canada, if a child at school decides to use the alternate pronoun to adopt a different gender identity, the schools are forbidden to tell the parents. So, and yes, increasingly they're doing gender reassignment on children who are very young.
And so again, it's part of the state's appropriation of the parental role. The parents don't get to have a say. If the 7-year-old boy decides he wants to be a 7-year-old girl, the parents are sidelined in whether the boy gets to do that.
Yes.
Which is wicked and totalitarian.
Yes. Well, you might want to leave the knives and the hormones for later in life. I mean, Ken Zucker, who was at Toronto's big hospital for the mentally ill, he worked on gender dysphoria. And his basic proposition was that you should wait, because most people who have gender dysphoria when they're young decide that they're homosexual. But about 90% of them settle into their biological identity by the time they're adults. And so his tack was to wait and see. And they scuttled his career, fired him.
Megan, who works at a clinic in Sydney with young people aged from 12 to early 20s who have asked for referrals for sex changes, says, often, especially with females, there's child abuse in the background, a lot of mental health issues and challenges. The system I work in does push that process. You're not able to say this is a psychological issue. There's this push to refer them out and get them processed, to send them to Westmead Children's Hospital and into that sex change process. It is a catastrophe for families. One father, Gus, tells of the most terrifying day of my life when he picked up his 16-year-old daughter from school and she didn't know where she was. She wasn't the full quid. She was just really confused. We went to the doctor and just out of the blue she said she was a boy in a girl's body. It turned out she was going through a psychotic episode. She was in hospital for 2 months. She's just a normal girl now. It was purely a mental health issue. So, of course, you should remember that the plural of anecdote does not equal data. But it appears that the Safe Schools program, in the short period of time it was in operation in New South Wales, has had some lasting effects. And remember, the government is going full steam ahead with the Safe Schools program in Victoria. Good luck to parents in that state. So what do you think will be the legacy of the Safe Schools program just a few years from now? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. See you next time.